Welcome to the Bond Online. My name is Eric, and today we're going to talk about how to manage groups in your Azure AD via the Microsoft Graph API. The first thing we're always going to do is check the API permissions of your Graph API enterprise application. If you're new here to this channel, I recommend that you watch episode 1 and 3. This will explain how you set up the Graph API connector. So first thing I'm going to do is to go to your Azure environment. You go to app registration, and there we have the Graph API we have configured. We go and open it, and we're going to check the API permissions if you have everything available to manage groups in Azure AD. Now, if I look at the script, I already sorted this out. What we need is group create, group read write, and group member read write all. And the directory read write all we already have. If you're going to use this to manage Azure AD role groups, you need an additional permission, which is called role management read write directory. I've written this down in your script. You can download the script, of course, from my website. And of course, there's also a link to GitHub if you look at my blog page. So the first thing we're going to do is see if we can have all the group permissions we need. And we're now going to add them to the Graph API connector. So that's group create, group read write all, and group member read write all. We're going to edit. So we're going to click on add permission, Microsoft Graph, application permission in this case. We type in group. And you see the group create, read write all. And we need from group member also read write all. Click on add permissions. See the permissions have been added. It's also required to grant them admin consent, so we're going to do that also. And now we have basically everything we need to be able to manage groups via the Graph API connector. So let's go to the Visual Studio and see if we can get it to work. First thing I'm going to do is, of course, create an access token. I've explained this in also episode 1 and 3, so if you need some additional information on how to set this up, it's pretty explained in detail in those episodes. So if you don't know how to do it, I recommend them that you watch these episodes first before you continue with this episode. So first we create a token, so we have access to our Graph API connector. Select line 18 till 26, press F8. And check if we have token access. We didn't get an error, so we should have given token access. Yep, there it is. Okay, now I've made 4 examples. The first one is that we create a single security group. The second one is how to add members. The third one is how to remove a member. And the last one is how to delete a single group. I focused in this video purely on security groups. If you want to use Microsoft 365 groups, it just requires an additional parameter, which you can find in the manual on the website. There's also a link in the script to this manual. So if you look at the create group, you want to create a Microsoft 365 group, you can see here the code you need. But now we're going to focus on security groups. Okay, so now we're going to create a security group called marketing. And these are the minimal variables you need to enter. If you can see here, we're going to create a marketing group with the description marketing group. Display name is marketing. The owner will be this user. And you see it uses the graph for users to add the owner. You can also do this via the user AD, but of course a UPN is more readable than just the user ID. So let's run it and see what happens. Okay, press F8. And you can see here what we should have now in your Azure AD is a group called marketing, with the owner call from Adele V and 2 members, that's Grady A and Henrietta M. So let's see if that has been created. We should go to the group, go to groups, and there's our marketing group. We see our owner, it's Adele Vance, and we see the members, and that's Grady RG and Henrietta Miller. You have 2 test users in our tenant. Nothing fancy, it's just a JSON file you create. And as you can see, mail enabled and mail nickname are also required fields. If you don't provide these attributes, your group won't be created. These are just the minimal attributes you need to enter. It's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to configure if you have this template. Okay. The next thing is we're going to add a member to one of the marketing groups in this case. There's one little caveat I want to mention. This part of the API requires that you use the group ID. And normally the group ID, you can, of course, retrieve it by looking at the properties. Here it is. But of course, if you want to script it, you just don't remember the ID. You just want to search for a name. Now, when I wrote this script, there was one little caveat, is I just couldn't get the filter to work with the display name. It just wouldn't give me any results back. I don't know if it's my fault, but I used the mail nickname and that worked properly. So we can test it. And I'll explain a bit about this part of the script on stuff you need to pay some attention to. So let's select this part and see what happens if we can retrieve the idea of the marketing group. So select this, press F8. Okay. Now what you see here, what I've done is I've used the group mail nickname to look for marketing. It will use the Graph API groups with the filter mail nickname equals the group mail nickname, which is basically this variable. So if you look at the variable with the actual values, you can see basically it's using Graph, the group's Microsoft Graph URL, then it applies a filter and it's looking for mail nickname equals marketing. Yeah, I still don't understand why the display name didn't work, but the mail nickname is working. So I use that for now. If you're able to solve that, please let me know in the comments. I wasn't able to get it to work in a short amount period of time. So, okay. And now what it does then, it will get this value. If you look at then it's the group, the Graph API provides back when you retrieve it. That's this part. What you can do then is, sorry, I made a slight mistake. That should be data, of course. This is what the API gives back. If you go to group, it will transfer it into a readable format like this. And then what you need, basically the value is this ID. This is what you need. And of course, this matches the ID you see here. So this ID will be put in this variable, and so we can use that in the next segment to retrieve, to grant the members to the group. So look at the member group ID. I made a typo there. S. Yeah, this is basically the value I retrieved via this part of the script. Okay, what you also need to do is retrieve the user ID if you want to add the member. That's basically the same thing. In this case, I'm not using one user I want to add, I use 3. I've put this in an array, but that's more easy in normal. So if you want to do it for more bulk, you can also use the import CSV command. It's a bit similar I used in the user management video. But for now, I just used 3 users I want to add, and I put them in an array, and then the array will be, how do you say, I've created a loop for each, which will handle the array one by one. And then it will add basically the user one by one to the group. It's also possible to do it in one go. Then you can add 20 user accounts to the group in one JSON body. There's a limit of 20 users then. I found it a bit difficult to script to use it to do it like that, because then the user ID value needs to be unique for 20 users, and I think this is a more simpler method, and you don't have the limit of the 20 users also. But if you have a better solution, please let me know. At least this is working. So what we're now going to do with this script is add these 3 users to the group marketing. Let's run it, and then we review the attributes just like we did with the last script. So, okay, so select the whole selection of example 2. Then we're going to press F8. It's running. And now what the end goal should be is that these 3 users should be added as members to the marketing group. So let's check first if that has happened, and then we're going to look at the results of the variables. So we look here with members. It always takes a minute before it's there. There they are. These 3, I've just added these 3 via the Graph API with the script I just ran. Okay, so let's go back. So since it is a loop, it has remembered the values of the last entry. In this case, that should be lin R. So now we're going to check the variables. If you look at data2, that's what the result which the Graph API gave back. So if you look at string data2, you see here the contents. In this case, for a user, you don't need to modify it via this command like you did with the group, because it's already in a format which is readable for PowerShell, which basically means you can directly get the attribute and put it in another variable like we do here. We do here. So if you look at user AD, which is basically data2, which we were looking at now, then it will put the ID value in the user ID. So if you look at the user ID, it should contain this value. And like I said, this is the last part of the array. It already did it for the first 2, but these are the values which it remembered from the last run. Even kijken, that's user ID, and you see this matches with this. So we did basically edit one by one these 3 users as a member of the marketing group. Okay. Okay, now we go to example 3. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to remove the Henrietta M user. That's already a member of the marketing group. This one. See if we can remove it via the Graph API. And the group, of course, is marketing, which we just created. It's very similar to adding a user. Basically, what you need to do is also retrieve the ID of the marketing group. So let's run this part. And it retrieves the group ID. So if you look at string, remove member group ID, you see this is the group ID of the marketing group, which we can verify by looking at the properties. Yeah, that's this value. It's basically the same as the last example. And in this case, you also need to get the ID of the user. Now, the remove user is, of course, Henrietta M. And what this part of the code will do is just retrieve the user ID, which is very similar like we did in the previous example. So if we're going to use this part, we also should retrieve the ID of Henrietta M. So let's run this. I'm going to string remove user ID. That's E93, so we have a look. See, E93, so that's her user ID. Okay, and what it will do next in the third part is basically, use these IDs to remove basically the user from the group. So if you can run it the whole example, select line 75 until line 89, and then press F8. And if we look now, then Henrietta M should be removed from the marketing group. It always takes a minute. Okay, next. Yep, and it's gone. As you can see, it's already removed from Azure AD, but it always takes a minute before the web portal shows the notifications. So now we've just we added users to the we've created a marketing group, we added users to the marketing group, and we removed the user from the marketing group. And the last part, we're going to delete the marketing group. Yeah, basically the same thing. We have this mail nickname, and we're going to use it as the search query to retrieve the ID. Like I said earlier, I had issues with the display name to look for, so I used the mail nickname. That worked. And if we have that, the ID, then we are able to remove it. So first we're going to use this part to check if we have retrieved the proper ID. Okay, so we're going to do the delete group ID. Typo, sorry. Delete group ID, there it is. Check if it's the right one, it should be. Yeah, 135. 135. Yeah, it's basically the same like we did in the previous examples. Now, then we have the group ID. Then we're going to use this URL to remove it with this method. And then we're going to remove now the marketing group we created in example 1. Okay. And see if it's removed now. Always takes a minute. Still there, just give it a minute. Yep, and it's gone. So now, hopefully this is very helpful for you. I suggest just to test the script, or at least the examples in the script. And yeah, hopefully it's useful to create your own scripts. So you have the basics on how to manage groups via the Graph API in Azure AD. And that was it. And I hope to see you on the next one. Goodbye.